Vintage Pfaff Sewing Machine Value, Ultimate Guide. If you own a Pfaff sewing machine in 2022, consider yourself on the list of people who own a collection of various gems. And if you yet don't have any knowledge of how worth your sewing machine is, then this article is all for you. You might be curious about what makes this antique so valuable, and it will surely be fun to learn about the company, since this German company is manufacturing these masterpieces since 1862. This article will provide you with complete information about the origin of Pfaff sewing machine, the most popular models, how much worth your Pfaff machine is, and finally where you can buy and sell this antique. History of Pfaff sewing machine. The Industrial Revolution brings encouraged craftsmen to start their businesses. One man recognized his opportunity when the Industrial Revolution started in Kaiserslautern, Germany, in 1862. At first, George Michael Pfaff created musical instruments, but as time passed by he understood the value of the sewing machine and the success its manufacturing can bring. The Munich Science and Technology Museum still has his authentic sewing machine on an exhibit. In the initial year of his business, he manufactured only one, but later he started expanding his productivity. In 1863 he produced 6 sewing machines, and in 1864 he was able to produce 46 machines. He sent his son to envision production facilities and power factories in 1876, once learning that the German home appliance industry purchased its instrumentality from America. Later, he also ordered drilling machines, toolkits, and global hand tools. After realizing he needs to produce thousands of machines, Mr. Pfaff instantly updated his types of equipment and production processes. Finally, in 1910 the firm produced its 1 millionth sewing machines. Unfortunately, Mr. Pfaff did not make it to see this success. Following his passing in 1893, his second son took over the company and aided in its expansion, becoming one of the world's best producers of sewing machines. Pfaff's history spans more than 150 years. Below mentioned are some interesting turning points in the developmental history of Pfaff. How to identify vintage Pfaff sewing machines. One of the most common ways to identify any model of vintage Pfaff sewing machine is the serial number mentioned on the machine's side or bottom. The instruction handbook for more current Pfaff sewing machines contains the serial number and the date of manufacture. If you are curious to know when your Pfaff machine was made and you only found the serial number on the machine, then you can contact Pfaff and ask them by telling them the serial number. Through serial numbers, it is easy to know the manufacturing year. To determine the production date of your Pfaff sewing machine, use the chart showing sample serial numbers of antique Pfaff machines and their associated manufacturing dates. Additional records of Pfaff sewing machine serial numbers and the years they were made were available online up to 1978. You can ask Pfaff directly if your sewing machine was manufactured in a year after 1978. If you want to figure out when your sewing machine was made, having the serial number beforehand will be useful. An overview of vintage Pfaff sewing machine models. The word Pfaff is mentioned on the body of almost every machine manufactured by Pfaff, and that is always helpful to recognize the sewing machine. The model number is also printed on the front of the machines. When Pfaff sewing machines first went on sale, they came with letters. Later in the 1800s, Pfaff started using numerals. Below is the list of the most famous Pfaff sewing machine models. Vintage Pfaff Model 11. This model was in production throughout the 1920s. Previously known as Model K, it was first offered as a treadle or hand crank machine with a vibrating shuttle. Like the majority of early Pfaff models, it boasts ornate golden decals and a fancy treadle. Vintage Pfaff Model 130. In 1932, Pfaff 130 model was produced, and it helped users to produce zigzag stitches. This model was one of the most famous models of vintage Pfaff sewing machines, and because of its popularity, it was produced for decades. This model was very well produced, and it has the ability to sew thick materials. Vintage Pfaff 230 and 230 automatic model. In the middle of the 1950s, Pfaff introduced the 230 and the 230 automatic sewing machines. At first Pfaff 230 was introduced, and later 230 automatic came into being. It has extra wide feed dogs and a rotary hook that faces forward. In Pfaff 230 automatic machine, a unique feature in the arm of the machine was introduced that makes it enables the creation of zigzag stitching. Vintage Pfaff model, 260. Another highly liked machine was produced by Pfaff in the 1960s. The vintage Pfaff 260 model was nicknamed as Dial-A-Stitch due to it being an electric machine that was completely automatic and had 80 different automatic stitches. It has a 9-layer denim and other thick textile sewing capacity and a 10-year warranty. Compared to the mounted motor and belt found on earlier Pfaff models, the internal motor in the Pfaff 260 offers it a more modern form. Its color is still gray or cream and is manufactured of metal. Vintage Creative Model, 1471. The production of this model started earlier in the 1979, but Pfaff didn't introduce it to customers until 1983. This model was progressive since it was completely programmable and allowed users to easily program their own patterns. Vintage Pfaff Model, 1475. This model was introduced in the year 1988, and it was the very first Pfaff sewing machine that was able to stitch 9 mm wide. It also had an add-on unit named the Creative Designer that let the sewer to design and duplicate stitches. Additionally, it was the first machine with 40 mm broad maxi stitches. Vintage Pfaff Model, 1222E. This design was launched in the late 1960s and its production continued thus far 1980s. This model has dual feed technology which allowed it to feed simultaneously through the top and bottom layers of the material. IDT, or Integrated Dual Technology, a recently added Pfaff sewing machine brand, was present in this kind of sewing machine. The Pfaff IDT system adds a second feeder, even though a standard sewing machine only uses the feed dogs at the bottom to feed fabric. Pfaff 7500 Series Model. The 7500 series was introduced in the year 1990, and they were first hoop-style embroidery machines by Pfaff with the development of stepping motors that moved the feed dogs in several directions. Later models in the series also had the ability to feed in multiple directions. There have probably been a lot of new Pfaff models made during the 1990s, but as our focus is on vintage models, none of these have been added to our collection. How can I determine my vintage sewing machine's value? You might be curious about how much worth your old sewing machine is in 2022 and how can you determine its value of it. Well, there are numerous ways and I had listed those ways below to help you know the value of your vintage sewing machine. Serial numbers. As far as we've discussed, you surely had understood the importance of serial numbers. You will always find the serial numbers on the machine itself or in the manual of the model. A vintage model's serial number is often stamped into the metal, frequently near the hand wheel or on the base. To find this number, you need to read the manual, or either you can find it on a metallic label of the certain model. Serial numbers are always helpful to find the age of your sewing machine. Model number. You have probably understood the value of the serial number of your vintage Pfaff sewing machine, but do you know how useful its model number also can be? This number is often painted or prominently visible on the machine's body. Whenever you need to discuss the machine you own, its model number is always referred, such as 260 or 130. The vintage sewing machine's age. Age is always the primary determinant of value. The first practical sewing machine was developed in the 1840s. Due to their historical relevance, sewing machines from the middle to the end of the 1800s are unusual and almost always prized. The vintage sewing machine created in the 1940s and 1950s is well liked due to its frequent appearance in vibrant colors of the machine. Sewing machines from the 1900s are not considered antiques, despite the fact that they make for intriguing interior decor. The bulk of machinery from the 20th century was mass-produced in their millions, and since most of them are made of metals, many of them endure. Unfortunately, this will reduce the sale price. Even if some machine brands are rare, the actual machine model is probably accessible from a variety of sources. Condition of the machine. The value of anything is obviously determined by its condition. The first thing our eyes always catch is the appearance and how presentable the thing is. If your antique sewing machine is rusted, chipped, or more briefly broken, then it automatically lowers its value. After considering the age and condition of your sewing machine, do extra research using eBay or Etsy. Online dealers in antiquities are another helpful source. If you've looked online and can't locate any sewing machines that are comparable, bring your sewing machine to an antique appraiser. By being aware of the factors that affect your sewing machine's value, you can avoid offers and assessments that are either too low or too good to be true. Lifespan of a Pfaff sewing machine. Pfaff is popular for its durability. If you buy a new Pfaff sewing machine today, you can find a warranty of 5, 10, or even 20 years, and that's what makes the brand stand out. What about older models, though? You can still find the older models of Pfaff in great working order, and the reason behind its durability is the pattern through which each machine is manufactured, the power its machine holds, and how perfectly each part is fitted. Some valuable antique Pfaff sewing machine. The price of your Pfaff sewing machine varies from model to model, as also its condition and edition. The ones in good condition are more prized, and also the features and how the particular model is built can increase or decrease the value that is related to its worth. The average sale of the sewing machine starts from $200 and can increase to more than $1,000. However, vintage Pfaff sewing machine brands typically cost more than twice as much as many other vintage sewing machine brands. An antique sewing machine typically costs $100 or less. Modern Pfaff models are obviously insanely expensive. The famous Pfaff 130 model can cost around $400 nowadays. Look for uncommon and collectible items. By examining such websites, one could find models on eBay or Etsy that would fetch substantially greater prices. Despite their collectability, the real value of a fantastic machine like the vintage Pfaff models lies in their functionality. These semi-industrial sewing machines have precisely fitting parts like a Swiss clock. They are also incredibly strong, allowing them to sew through thick fabrics. These elements explain why sewing enthusiasts appreciate valuable vintage sewing machines so much. Here is the list of Pfaff sewing machines sold at auction sites and other platforms. The worth of any machine is determined by its condition, and Pfaff machines are mostly famous for their quality. And the worth of Pfaff machines is determined by how managed it is. If their quality is not satisfying, it may just be worth a few dollars. Pfaff 7570 Creative 7570 Sewing Machine for $229. Germany Pfaff 332 Automatic Sewing Machine, 4F2. ZS, for $225. Pfaff 1222E Sewing Machine with Pedal and Manual, Repair, for $199. Beautiful Vintage Pfaff Model 130 with Embroidery Unit for $250. Pfaff 130 Sewing Machine Serviced for Leather Denim Plus, Y54P2, for $295. Pfaff Model 230 Electric Sewing Machine for $84. Pfaff Sewing Machine 130 Antique Vintage Estate Black in Original Case Reed for $102. Pfaff 30 Sewing Machine for $50. Pfaff 332 Sewing Machine Vintage with Cord and Control for Parts for $140. Vintage Pfaff 130 Sewing Machine with Pedal and Book for $117. Pfaff Tipmatic 1027 Sewing Machine for $85. Rare 1908 Pfaff 23-2 Industrial Leather Sewing Machine for Restoration for $425. Pfaff 30 Electric Vintage Sewing Machine with Instruction Manual and Attachments for $306. Online platforms to sell and buy those antiques. Pfaff sewing machines. Vintage sewing machines can be purchased through yard sales, thrift shops, and antique shops in person. You can look for these vintage machines on eBay or Etsy. Therefore, your best option, if you need to discover one right away, is to look online. If you are curious to discover antique or new Pfaff sewing machines, you can find them online through this website. This website has numerous types of models available at a good price. Another famous site is eBay. You can easily find your desired Pfaff sewing machine here, and another benefit is you can also sell your own machine here. They can reach a big worldwide audience and offer an e-commerce function that is incredibly user-friendly. One of the benefits of buying in person is you can directly check the functions of the machine right on spot and can buy and take it home if it is under your desires. However, in online shopping, some dealers also provide a return policy so that you can return the machine if you don't like it. You also have access to a wider variety of vintage machines. The disadvantage of purchasing your machine online is that you might have to spend a significant amount for shipping because these vintage versions may weigh a ton. Tips to repair your vintage Pfaff sewing machine. Since it's a machine, like every instrument, it also needs a refurbishment or repair. Now obviously, if your Pfaff machine is damaged to the extent that there is no option left other than to take it to any professional, then it's better to get it done as soon as possible. However, if you are new or your model is still stable and you want to avoid all this happening, then here is a quick guideline. Read the manual as soon as you had bought the sewing machine. Trust me, this step will help you avoid all the mistakes we make unconsciously that result in a decrease in the lifetime of our precious instrument. Oiling is like food to any machine. It's always mentioned in the manual, you just need to understand where you need to put the tiny drops of the particular oil. Cleaning is always necessary. The bobbin casing and the feed dogs should have built up lint removed using a tiny brush. Clean everything that is recommended in the instructions. You can try a few remedies if the machine won't sew despite being spotless, clean, and well oiled. Rethread the upper and lower threads initially. Rethreading solves 9 out of 10 sewing machine issues, even on brand new machines. Next, determine whether the bobbin needs special alignment. Some versions could have a bobbin with a notch that must be precisely aligned in its casing. Also avoid using the wrong side of the needle and select the accurate weight of the thread. Last but not least, if you own an electrically powered model, then make sure to check its wiring from time to time. Don't keep the machine plugged in while you are not using it. Is Pfaff sewing machine a great choice? There is absolutely no doubt that Pfaff sewing machines are one of the best sewing machines since the 1800s. Pfaff has been designing and manufacturing astonishing models that have always caught the attention and have been proven rivals to any other modern brand out there. Models from Pfaff are precise, powerful, and robust. They have top-notch engineering and robust metal components. Additionally, Pfaff produced extremely robust sewing equipment that could be used for both professional and domestic purposes. The value and how demanding vintage Pfaff is can be recognized by the price their machines hold, since it costs double what many other antique brands did. Pfaff sewing machines are known for their quality and endurance. There are various auction sites and antique shops available where you can buy your desired model at a reasonable price. Pfaff has gained the trust of its customers in the market between other rich brands. If you are someone who enjoys sewing, then buying a Pfaff sewing machine can be worth your time and money. Summary: Pfaff models are one of those rare antiques that stand out and still works efficiently even after decades of its production, and it is rare to find a vintage sewing machine of this quality. Anything from the 1960s would work if you're searching for an ancient Pfaff sewing machine that you can still use and has contemporary features like an integrated motor and a selection of automatic stitches. In comparison to purchasing a new Pfaff, you will obtain a sewing machine that is dependable and maybe save some money as well. However, if you are looking for decorative yet older models, then Pfaff 31 and Pfaff 50 are good to go. They have still a very spectacular decorative appearance. Our takeaway: whether you had recently bought or are deciding to buy or already own a Pfaff sewing machine, I hope this guide was helpful to you to acknowledge the worth of the antique vintage Pfaff sewing machine. But if still have any queries and are determined to buy this antique, then it's suggested to have a chat with a professional so that they can guide you more precisely and save you from wasting your money.